Should we just clear out half an hour, 45 minutes to talk about Owen Farrell? What do you reckon?
Yeah. Different podcast, bonus pod.
It helps when you're playing against a team that looks like they've just met each other in the lobby.
The amount of times I've said something's nailed on, and I was just thinking, if we say Jones is nailed on and it's
not
Jamie Osborne out of nowhere, that would be very
Stone Cold
interesting.
Steve. Right, well, listen, I'm happy to wear that one. But hey, we've seen Lions series of the very recent past that there'll be guys that start the first test who will not see start again for the remainder of it.
So we just had confirmation from the press conference that Garry Ringrose is out.
Sometimes I think we give test coaches far too much credit.
Go.Compare, proud sponsors of the Welsh Rugby Union, are delighted to power the Telegraph Rugby Podcast this summer. Go.Compare is here to support fans on their journey to satisfying insurance. Whether you're looking for the right cover for your car, home or travel plans, get peace of mind knowing you've got an expert by your side every step of the way. So, stop overpaying and start comparing with Go.Compare.
Well, there you go. That's the last tour match before the Test series for the British and Irish Lions handily dispatched the AUNZ Invitational 15. My name is Alan Dimmock. I'm commissioning editor for sport at the Telegraph, and I'm joined, as ever, by Charlie Morgan, who's back from Disneyland. Charlie, lovely tan you're sporting at the moment, by the way.
Thank you.
Straight off, what did you make of that one? You were just telling us how it was a bit of a feel-good factor there.
Yeah, it was. I had a bit of a spring in my step coming up to the studio after that. We arrived a little bit flat. I think the last couple of performances, fair to say, had enough from the Lions before this, had enough flat patches to make you wonder whether the tour was on a little bit of a tipping point, whether it could kind of descend into sort of real clunkiness with a loss or just more of an unconvincing display tonight. But from the off, that was really slick, really ambitious, just a lot of conviction about it. Never, notwithstanding the really poor opposition, I don't think that can be sort of. There's a big caveat there because they were.
Can only play what's in front of you.
You can, and in that respect, it was very impressive from the Lions.
Okay, so this is the last match before the Test series starts. We're going to dive right into talking about what that means for the Test 15. Question marks over a few injuries. Some guys maybe took their last opportunity to put their hand up. Some maybe didn't. In that one, we will also have Gavin Mairs joining us from the ground as ever. Let's talk Lions. Okay, so Lions 48, AUNZ Invitational 15-0. And thankfully don't have to say that again.
You've rattled it off twice.
Yeah, now.
Beautifully.
First time the Lions have nailed anyone on this series. I thought we were staring down the barrel of every single try being scored by a Scotland international, which I was pretty chuffed about.
I'm going to sell you out here. When it was Kelleher who scored and there was a groan from the office behind me because that line was gone. But no, yeah, they're really, really impressive all round.
I mean, just generally, impressive. Who did you like seeing in that match? Who impressed you?
Huw Jones. We know that's timely because of the news we're probably going to get into a little bit later that Garry Ringrose seems to be a serious doubt given Andy Farrell's sort of expression when asked about him afterwards. Really impressed also by Ben Earl for the second game in a row. I think just quietly he's been quite assured and accurate. When he's been on the pitch, there haven't been those restart issues quite often because they've gone deep to him and he's been able to sort of have a bit of room to get a bit of steam up. Those two. Oh, Ben White, sorry, but really big fan of Ben White generally. He'd have been in my initial squad. I just think he's just so unfussy, so accurate with his passing game, with his kicking game, and he showed a bit of intuition with a sniping try himself, but also he was the kind of link man for the first try, which got the Lions off from Hugo Keenan's quick line out. Got the Lions off to a great start. Hugo Keenan as well would be another guy I'd single out in a position where the Lions really need a bit of certainty.
Now, for those who are fans of continuity, for those people that watch movies and go, he wasn't wearing those trainers in the scene before. Sometimes, every week we do the who's up and who's down. We are still going to get to that at the end, but actually we're going to talk more about the Test 15. I'm going to get Charlie's Test 15 at the end of this segment here, chatting about that. But let's zero in on a couple guys there. Keenan really needed that performance for a start, didn't he?
I think he needed it, given how poor he'd been in that Tars game. Doing uncharacteristic things in the Tars game as well. It was a Tars game, right? But he was missing sort of one-on-one tackles and just looking a little bit uncertain in the backfield, where his coverage has been just a staple of how good Ireland have been over the last few years. He just looked sharp again, and the sort of the defensive performance as imaginative as the AUNZ side were, his coverage really felt like he really gave his front line a lot of confidence. And it wasn't a coincidence in that regard that there was a lot of the front line looked really robust.
Yeah, really switched on from Keenan. Like, there was a moment that sticks out. I remember him catching the ball, getting someone right at him, and he just sort of took the glancing blow and spun out, and it's like, that's the kind of thing where you can see his confidence is growing. That try for Duhan van der Merwe, where the ball was hoofed off the park, he saw a great opportunity, he ran up, and no one on the opposition team, and this is the cohesion that you're not dealing with a scratch side like this, but saw the opportunity, ran it up, quick throw, and then it just created a try out of nothing. And it's like, that's the kind of thing where it's like, right, just sharpness. That's the kind of thing that Andy Farrell's looking for.
Potentially could continued a theme on this Lions tour as a whole about players not backing up unconvincing performances. There have been a few, Jack Morgan, Scott Cummings, those guys sort of recovered. Even Henry Pollock, if you think about his cameo against Argentina not going particularly well. So that's a really good sign. That's a sign of sort of togetherness on this tour and players sticking in the fight, making it difficult for Andy Farrell when test selection comes around.
Now, because we've had a dizzying amount of rugby played from the Lions on this tour, we are now heading into a week where it's just prep for the first test. Due to the dizzying nature of those previous fixtures, maybe there's some news that we haven't touched on too much. So, for example, just to catch you up on some things, Jamie Osborne has been called up to the Lions as cover. Blair Kinghorn, they're saying that he will continue his recovery from that knee injury he suffered. He's going to get some time to get back into training. Osborne has been called up from the Ireland team to cover training primarily, but Charlie, we know how these things work. He could end up, an injury away from being involved in a match. But what do you make initially just of Osborne calling up? I know you're a big fan.
Very rangy, very athletic player, very versatile as well. He started at fullback in a test win in South Africa, which is no mean feat. He's probably more of a centre now. I think he's given.
Well, he was named at 13 to play against Portugal for Ireland this weekend.
So against Georgia, I believe. Big strapping guy, so gets through a lot of those tight carries pretty well. 6'4", big body, and we know that. I mean, judging by the outside backs that have come on this trip, Andy Farrell really enjoys those big bodies in the back three.
Was it you that was suggesting that he could be a decoy Suaalii in training?
Well, I was, and that was before this news about Garry Ringrose has come to light. And to me, the news about Garry Ringrose puts this into a little bit of a different light as well, because he's a potential that second 13. Because if Garry Ringrose is definitively ruled out of the first test, you've got Huw Jones, and then you're probably looking at Tommy Freeman having to do a job there. So someone like Jamie Osborne is particularly useful there. And we had the sort of smokescreen of this happening after Blair Kinghorn going off with a knee injury, when actually that he could be more usefel.
As much as an injury can be a smoke-screen.
yeah, as much as somebody actually going for a scan can be a smoke-screen. But no, just a very useful pick for his versatility, for his athleticism, and for clearly that familiarity with the massive Leinster contingent that are on this tour.
Well, you mentioned Jones there. I mean, Huw Jones, very assured performance. There was just nice moments where he could see a gap opening up in front of him, and he's just like, well, the right thing to do is to take that. Even just when he chipped ahead, it was like that is the one option available to him. He just looked like he was really enjoying himself in the middle of that game, and then it was notable that the Lions coaches went, okay, we've seen enough from him. If Garry Ringrose is a doubt, that's enough, thanks mate, off you come. Then that opened the door for a certain Owen Farrell to play in the centre. We saw Tui Piloto move out. Should we just clear out half an hour, 45 minutes to talk about Owen Farrell? What do you reckon?
Yeah. Different podcast, bonus pod. Interesting that he went to 12, and we had a reprisal of Marcus Smith 10 and Farrell 12 last seen against Scotland 2023, I think, in the 2024 Six Nations. So Steve Borthwick's 2023 Six Nations. So Steve Borthwick's first Six Nations as a sort of hangover from the Eddie Jones era. That combination seemed to have gone with Eddie Jones, but I think Steve Borthwick had to use it out of necessity in that game after a few injuries at 12.
He looked real comfy.
Looked really comfortable. Just looked. I mean, it's odd sort of watching it. You were thinking, is he going to come on, try too hard here? His form was such an unknown given how disrupted he'd been at Racing 92, and even watching the kind of fits and spurts that he was on the pitch at Racing 92, he either wasn't moving freely, clearly because of his injury, and then when he was moving clearly, it was obvious that not obvious, but you could sort of tell, you may be striving with the language barrier there. You're not going to be as authoritative as you have to be, or the way he likes to play. And you could tell. I don't think he looked particularly overbearing as he has done maybe in the past with England. He just looked very at home, and
he looked like he had a smile on his face.
Yeah, which is great. You know,
full caveat as well. It helps when you're playing against a team that looks like they've just met each other in the lobby.
Yeah, they look bad. They look so bad on the onside, and I think it was Jamie Wall on X posting, "Let's never speak about this side ever again." Someone else, I think, is
big fan of their kit though.
It's Taylor. Yeah, the black panel,
the tiny black panel to represent New, even though a lot of the big names in the team are
largely green and gold canvas.
Mate, I liked it.
Yeah, we've had Taylor King Tay 4 on X saying, "Will it be another 36 years before we see that ONS team?" Possibly, who knows?
It would only be fair.
It didn't work, yeah. But having said that, really, really comfortable, assured stuff from Owen Farrell when he's playing well. Players around him go really well. He was involved in a really nice strike play for Van der Merwe's third, I believe, when he takes a ball at first receiver, plays the ball across Marcus Smith to it's Hansen coming off the blindside wing. Just nice touches like that. He had a surprise carry and offload. He's actually underrated, I think, offloading. Sort of that's an area of his game we don't really talk about a lot, but he doesn't make a lot of mistakes in contact. And there was also the grubber for Henry Pollock, sort of opportunistic try where he's just made the right decision, turned a kind of pretty flappy defence. But yeah, lots of accurate stuff.
Now, sometimes here at the Telegraph we get accused of focusing too much on certain people. Henry Pollock's had a lot of attention from us, rightly so, in my view, because what a rise he's had. But let's just stick with Owen Farrell for another minute or two. Do you expect that is there an opportunity we see him in that first test week in the 23?
Definitely an opportunity, and more so given how he went. I wouldn't do it. I still would probably go with Aki and Tuipulotu in the same 23 with one of them on the bench, and I think Owen Farrell can do a lot of his influencing in and around training in the week in the lead up to that test. I think Marcus Smith has taken a step forward and maybe usurped Finn Smith as far as getting that 22 shirt if they go with a 5-3, because he was decent enough from fullback against the Brumbies. They targeted him in the air and he just about held firm there. But it's an option. It's for it to be a live option almost vindicates the call, I think, to bring him in. And I wrote after the Waratahs game that the Waratahs performance was the exact reason that Andy Farrell had brought in Owen, and I just thought that they'd clearly fixed a lot of that thing. They were a lot tighter in, they were a lot more direct. You could tell from Tuipulotu's first carry, it was right. That's enough of this mucking about sort of thing. It just looked like they knew that going north-south is going to be more important than the Test series, and is just going to get them a lot more opportunities.
Okay, great to see at the end of the game Luke Cowan-Dickie up and about chatting to people. There was a moment where he went off on a motorised stretcher. Luke Cowan-Dickie's tackle technique can be devastating for attacks, and that he chops people right down, but sometimes you run the risk, and he took a head-on knee moment, and he looked like he was out cold. Now, obviously, you have to look after player safety, and we'll go through the return to play protocols and all of that kind of stuff. The Lions, no matter what, really are going to probably have to bring a hooker in to make sure that they've got enough bodies in training anyway. How do you foresee that playing out? We'll get an update, obviously, and it feels like every time we do this podcast that we don't know exactly where we are with the health of X player, but on this one, you suspect that they're going to have to call someone up, and who would be in the forefront of their thinking? Yeah,
we'll get more from Gav post press conferences, but to Sky Sports just after the game there, Andy Farrell was all but confirmed that they would need cover for Luke Cowan-Dickie. It's a specialist position. They can't go into a test week with just two because you'd need some.
So do you go Dowie Lake from Wales, or it stopped the run of losses today against Japan? Dowie Lake captained them out there. Japan is obviously not that far away. Or you go to Argentina and do you get...
Well, the two Scotland guys went... George Turner's a barrel of energy in Ewan Ashman was pretty good, notwithstanding Scotland was lost to Fiji. I think they will probably go with Jamie George just for A, the familiarity of him being training cover, B, the experience of just if one of Kelleher or Sheehan go down, you want somebody who is cool, calm, composed, and is just going to be able to sit on a test bench. And he went really, really well, it has to be said, against Argentina. It would be interesting in the next, this might fall into the ether between recording and this podcast going live, but it would be very interesting to see if Jamie George is in fact pulled from the game against Argentina, the England second test, because that clearly would be the quickest way to get him out there.
That's snap pause, ladies and gentlemen. There's going to be stuff that we do miss. That's how you pod. Okay, we've already heard from you who's impressed. I'll tell you what, I think it's pretty straightforward that all eyes are now on Garry Ringrose's fitness and where we are. And if there's any doubt about him whatsoever, then you imagine Huw Jones has got that 13 on his back for that first test. We've got plenty of time to knock in. Is there, in terms of who's up and who's down, do you think there's anyone else who's sort of wading their way into that test scenario now off the back of today?
There are... You look for clues, don't you? And I think Ben Earl may be coming off early and being the first back rower to come off, and Jack Morgan and Henry Pollock therefore going 80.
It was a hell of a game from Ben Earl today.
Yeah, I think he's quite an... And I mentioned this on another podcast, but he... On first watch against Argentina, when I was at the game, he seemed quite quiet, and he seemed like he was really kind of trying to strive to get into the game. And his first game on Aussie soil, again, I forget who that was, but we said the same, didn't we? That there was a lot of effort without him really having those game-breaking moments. I think he almost got his rewards for those today, and I think he's been tidy. And I think what he offers is a specialist 8 to cover Jack Conan. A lot of test sides will go into a game with 2 8s now, and it's not insignificant that he can, if pushed, move to 12, because again, this is another point we've made repeatedly. Test backlines at the end of any backlines at the end of any game, and especially test matches, can be a total war zone. Think back to 2013 and Michael Hooper having to kind of moonlight at centre and the Lions taking advantage. Those are things that happen, and that versatility. It's sort of been a hot topic, and when you ask the man himself, he's sort of a bit nonplussed about the fuss of it all. But I think Ben Earl being able to cover 12 is a thing and important.
Okay, Finn Smith.
Yeah.
He didn't look quite so comfortable today, and you think that he needed a big performance today, considering all the chatter around what the composition of the bench should be for the first test against the Wallabies. Yeah,
I thought he got a bit. He was at the heart of some nice stuff in the first half. I think he's potentially there was that Luke Cowan-Dickie actually bombed what would have been one of the best tries on the whole tour, if not one of the best try. And if you watch that back, it's Finn Smith going to a wide ruck, making sure that's all right, and sweeping in behind the forward pod to put Huw Jones away. That's the kind of thing he's really good at, and you almost sense that he is a really understated part of how things tick for his teams, for both Saints and for England. And I feel that maybe Marcus Smith's versatility just might win out in that bench battle of just being sort of edging towards that, making a bit more sense. And it might be that Finn Smith has to make do with starting that warm-up game against the Pacifica side next week.
Okay. I'm going to put you on the spot.
Yeah.
Throughout the weeks, we've been asking our rugby writers here at the Telegraph to update what they think is their Test 23. After that, Charlie, because obviously now all eyes are on the Wallabies, and we will chat a bit about Australia after this. Don't worry, guys, we're not just going to focus entirely on the Lions. But with that in mind, I suppose just going through your 15 first, who do you see as now you think, yeah, that's what the team's going to look like?
So we just had confirmation from the press conference that Garry Ringrose is out. So not just a doubt, he's out. So
it's out for the whole tour?
No, out for the first test.
Okay.
So he'll come back into the reckoning for the second test, presumably. That was the noises that, again, Andy Farrell was making at full time. So
okay.
we're going 15-9, 1-8. Old school. Okay. Blair Kinghorn. I'm saying Blair Kinghorn is fit. So he's 15. Tommy Freeman, 14. Just shading. Matt Canson, who's good again. Huw Jones, 13. I think with that in mind, do you know what? Tui Palotu. I'm still torn on that, so we'll come back to that. 11 James Lowe, 10 Finn Russell, 9 Jamison Gibson Park, 1 Ellis Gaines Sheehan. I would start Finlay Bealham.
Let's go.
Yeah, I just think he's very tidy. I'm not necessarily sure you need that. If you've got Ellis Gaines starting, you really need that carry of Furlong, which I really haven't seen anyway. So Finlay Bealham 3. I'd go Itoje and Chessum. Curry 6. Jack Morgan 7. Conan 8.
Okay.
I think so. Reasoning for that, I think they've looked at their best with 2 locks and a bit more mobility. I think Curry hasn't been quite at his marauding best, but it was getting thereabouts in that Brumbies game for the first 50 minutes he was on. Him and Jack Morgan have had a lot of, if you look at the time that combinations have spent together, he's spent a lot of time with Jack Morgan as a 6 and 7. And yeah, I think that probably gets them, we've spoken about Tom Curry's sort of unheralded line out work, and I think that gets them the best blend of line out work, mobility, and a bit of whack, because the Joe Schmidt has seemingly come around to having 2 8s in that starting Wallabies pack, whether that's Rob Valentini and Harry Wilson, or in this last game, the Adelange Gleeson at 6, who's another sort of flinty carrier to complement Fraser McWright. So I think that where I feel like it's reasonably obvious where the Australia are going to come really hard, which is at the breakdown. So that what they need there is a lot of mobility. And so that's why I've gone with that 6 and 7. 12, to just go back to that, it is a real toss-up, because I think Aki's being good. I know that Farrell values him. I would do my very best to get one at 12 and one at 23. Mm-hmm. And I think actually with what we were talking about, having Marcus Smith at 22 and able to slip to 15, I think that helps you, because you've got with Freeman, with Kinghorn, you've got a bit of 15, 13, 11, funky bit of 10. You've got that flexibility. Huw Jones as well. Huw Jones absolutely lit up a season for Harlequins at 15, and
what a callback.
Yeah, but that's there. That's that flexibility is there, and he's looked sharp.
Yeah. I think 15 is still the question mark. I just don't know if we know at all where Kinghorn is.
Yeah.
And so for that reason, I suspect we're going to see Keenan at 15.
Yeah.
Lowe, by the same token, really wasn't great in the last game at all. But I still suspect that we're going to see Lowe with his enormous monster of a boot, and Freeman on the wings. I think you're umming and ahhing. I think Aki's nailed on. I think he's certain to play. And now with Jones will be wearing that 13 shirt now, you just suspect that it's like, right, Farrell's going to go with what he knows with Aki and just have him there. So I suspect that's the case. Go on.
I was just laughing because the amount of times I've said something's nailed on, and I was just thinking, if we say Jones is nailed on and it's
not
Jamie Osborne out of nowhere, that would be very interesting.
Right, well, listen, I'm happy to wear that one.
Yeah.
Logic would dictate
yes, that's totally
that Jones is at 13, and for that reason, if Jones is at 13, it just makes total sense for them to have Aki at 12. Yeah. The halfbacks, listen, we can chisel that in. Well, we have been chiseling it in. It would be a real shock if it's not. But Gibson Park and Russell, yeah, we know where we're at with that. Genge, Sheehan, and I suspect actually that we're going to see Furlong start. I suspect, because he's starting to come into. We were saying the last time we did the pod that actually there's now some chatter about people going like, yeah, dependable, great. Doesn't have to be flash as hell. He's dependable, and you'd always want to have someone that is like the known quantity like that, who will be able to hold his own in the set piece. Absolutely no bother there, and then you can have someone else come off the bench, which I suspect will. Well, for me, I would have Bealham as well. Big fan of what he's done on this tour, and I think, but I just think I'm now edging towards Furlong, and then it's Itoje and McCarthy, I think,
yeah,
are still there. And then, you know what? I think a Curry Van der Fleer flankers would be really interesting to see, and then Conan is Conan at number 8. If we see that, I could see that being like, yeah, that feels like an Andy Farrell first test team.
Yeah. My and I'm not sure whether we mentioned this or not yet, but the 5-3 / 6-2 conundrum on the bench, that gives you there are going to be contentious omissions whatever happens, but one of the most contentious is going to be one of those flankers, right? So you've got Morgan, Ringrose, Pollock, Earl. If we consider that if we take as read that Conan is a stick on, which he probably is, at least in the 23, then you can't really fit all of those other. You certainly can't fit 4 of them. Sorry, certainly can't fit all of them in. So somebody who is left out, they're going to be very disappointed, which is a testament to how they've gone and how they've pushed each other.
But hey, we've seen Lions series of the very recent past that there'll be guys that start the first test who will not see start again for the remainder of it.
Yeah, poor Peter O'Mahony, right?
Well, as I live and breathe, it's Gavin Mairs from Adelaide. Gav, how are things? And what did you make of that first up?
Much better performance for the Lions. Much better at the breakdown in terms of their directness, in terms of their attacking cohesion. I think inevitably the quality of the opposition wasn't quite what was expected. The gelling aside in 7 days was always going to be tough. But as Andy Farrell said, it was a professional performance. And I think I think looking at what we saw tonight, the standout for me really is the reintroduction of Owen Farrell into the team. Second half cameo, where he had a number of very assured touches, some very positive contributions. I think he was involved in the build-up to 3 of the second half tries. And, we've also seen, in terms of news today, we've had Garry Ringrose unfortunately ruled out the first test with concussion, and that has had major implications to the kind of midfield dynamic. Huw Jones was brilliant tonight, and we saw the fact that he was taken off early in the second half.
Yeah,
to me says everything about him being wrapped up now. Cotton wool, he's ready to go. The big question will be, I think before tonight's game, I would have had Bundyaki ahead at 12.
Oh,
but
interesting.
Andy Farrell may look towards that Scottish partnership in the midfield. But also, remarkably, Al, I think it really, really does open the door for Owen to come onto the bench next Saturday. Because really, if you look at the combinations in the back to cover the backs next week, we could end up with both Marcus Smith and Owen Farrell together, as they did come on tonight together as a combination. So really, other than that, I thought, Henry Pollock, great game. Ben Earl, great game. And overall, I just thought it was a really lot sharper. I think Mac Hansen as well has done an awful lot to sort of press claim whether it's enough. It may not be. Tommy Freeman's been very impressive, but Andy Farrell said he was happy where he was in terms of the contributions and the competition that he has in terms of bringing his squad together. Probably, after a flight to Brisbane tomorrow, coaches meeting, I think we'll see the guts of the team put together tomorrow night.
Lovely. Okay. One of my hallmarks of this tour so far has been seeing all the different backdrops that Gavin Mairs has around the various stadiums of Australia. Great to see the breeze block number behind you today. You're right.
We are in the boils of the Adelaide Oval at the minute.
Yeah. Obviously, lots of interesting news. Cowan Dickey, there was noises afterwards that it looks like they're certainly going to have to call someone out. Has there been any indication about what their thinking will be with that? Because there's a few options available to them about where in the world they pull another hooker in to make up some numbers.
Yeah, Andy Farrell wouldn't commit to a decision in front of us anyway. I mean, what is certain is that Jamie George, in all things being equal, will be the next man in. He's been involved in Portugal already, and is highly rated by Farrell, and would also bring huge experience. He's a, 2 times tourist already, former England captain. He's due to be playing for England at some stage today. I can't quite work out the time difference, but whether or not he is pulled from that game or not will be really fascinating. But I think the fact that they have they still have Ronan Kelleher, who will be the bench cover on Saturday. I think, in my mind anyway, I think will afford not the luxury, but will enable Andy Farrell to bring Jamie George across from Argentina, even with the long distance travel and the time difference. Because really, what Andy Farrell doesn't want to do right now is make a rush decision based on geography when you're looking ahead to test 2 and 3 as well. Jamie George would be a huge addition as a player, as a leader, and with his own Lions experience. So that's who I expect him to go for. But as yet, we've had no official confirmation.
Gavin, it's proper get the band back together stuff if Jamie George does come over. Saracens' point of view.
It really is, and I think the regret is, the regret is that like Elliot Daly's reportedly at Lord's today watching the cricket. If he had still been there, it really would have been getting the band back together. But I mean, it's listen, those guys know how to win big games. They're hugely experienced, and at this stage, Charlie, Farrell wants to bring in guys who he trusts and know what this is about. And we looked at all the hullabaloo about bringing in Owen Farrell. He didn't miss a beat today. I've just spent 10 minutes there talking with Marcus Smith, who could have felt his nose could have been put out by Farrell's call up, but he talked about how he loved playing alongside him, the experience, the leadership that Owen Farrell brought to the game tonight, and you could see them actually. I thought it was quite interesting to see how they lined up and how at some stage Farrell stepped in the first receiver, and yet Marcus was given the kicking responsibility, and is obviously a playmaking option as well. Could be quite interesting to see those two both from the bench next Saturday and the impact they may have to change how the Lions are trying to play against the Wallabies.
Andy Farrell's a man you know very well. What sort of you've just come from the press stuff, and just to let people peek behind the curtain, what sort of mood does he appear in? Because we're now into Test week.
I think he's not far off. I mean, listen, we've had injuries, big injury setbacks, but he's been on 2 Lions tours before. He knew that he was going to lose people. It's just the way of Lions tours. You lose people, unfortunately, and often at critical times. So, but I think he was pleased tonight because, there has been moments on this tour so far where the Lions have done some really, really good things, also some pretty ordinary bits to their play. But I think with every game, we've seen incremental improvements. And guys, we have to bear in mind they are keeping a lot back. There is a really intriguing cat and mouse game going on with Joe Schmidt. They both know each other so well. There's a feeling here that Joe Schmidt's been testing the Lions out, asking the Super Rugby sides to really go after the breakdown, and also, employ, like, say, Mauls attacks. Hopefully, we're going to have a drinks going so noise. You can see they've been testing key aspects of the Lions game, not necessarily playing as a Super Rugby team would on their own identity. So again, I asked him just in the press conference there, does he feel where he wants to be in terms of how difficult it's going to be to pick a test side? And he feels he is. And I think, we saw tonight a professional performance. The quality of the opposition hasn't always been where it's been. The Lions have had to really gel on the move, and critically next week. They fly to Brisbane tomorrow. They're going to have a full week for the first time to be together. train Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And I think that's when we will see the real nuts and bolts of this side come together. And hopefully we will see the Lions put their best foot forward in the first test in Brisbane.
Okay, I think you're about to get bundled into the back of a bin lorry or something there, Gav. Just very quickly, last one there is, you mentioned where the Lions feel they are where they want to be. What's the vibe like now in Australia? Because we've had some matches where maybe the atmosphere hasn't quite been there, but it feels like there was maybe a bit of a step up. How is the mood? Does it feel like we're now heading into a test week?
Yeah, so again, tonight was probably, there was definitely a different atmosphere among the Lions supporters. We've seen some of the early games. Really, I think the Lions supporters have been largely expats, Pats living in Australia. I think we've seen now the first, we heard Land of My Fathers today. The Welsh have arrived. To me, my standout memories of my previous two tours to Australia have been first week in Brisbane. Suddenly the Sea of Red arrive on test week and it overwhelms the city. And it's one of the most remarkable things. Rugby union is not the main sport in this country by a long stretch, but it is one of the few international sports. And the Lions Tour brings in overseas supporters like nothing else in Australia. And it's just fantastic to see. I really hope Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, we'll see lots of supporters coming in and really, really build the atmosphere for that first test, because it just changes everything, guys. I think we've seen matches here, music being played really loudly to try and generate an atmosphere that almost kills it by trying to do that. The colour of the Lions fans is what makes these tours so special. And let's fingers crossed we start to see them all pile in to Brisbane early next week.
Well, there's test match animals and then there's Gavin Mairs. Gav, enjoy your week in Brisbane. We'll catch up with you after the very first test. Thanks very much for joining us.
Good choices lead to great moments. Like when a clever dummy pass leads your team over the try line to victory. Making a savvy move and finding the insurance for you can feel like a win. Go.compare can help you take control of your financial decision-making. Get quotes in minutes and switch to more satisfying cover with confidence. It's your safety net. Sorted. Rugby teams don't run the same moves week in, week out, so you shouldn't just let your insurance auto-renew out of habit. Explore your options and see if you can score an even better deal. Go.compare is powering the Telegraph Rugby Podcast this summer and empowering you to make savvy decisions when it comes to your finances.
Okay, Charlie, can we chat the Wallabies?
Yeah.
Because we haven't really had an opportunity. Firstly, that Fiji test, how much do you take from that?
Do you know what? I was watching it back post Disneyland, and more.
It's just a ridiculous phrase.
I think more, whether this is just human nature or not, more after watching a little bit or a fair bit of what Fiji did against Scotland, and actually thinking that it was a more impressive performance by Australia to keep them at bay when they hadn't had too much time together. They'd had more of a camp and more of a build-up, I think, than Fiji had, but still got themselves out of a tricky situation in that game. Had a couple of tries, I believe, chalked off. There are some absolute givens about them. Fraser McWright is superb over the ball. Their 10 is obviously a big question mark with Noah Lolesio going down and them either sort of having to go Donaldson or
what about
James O'Connor.
The sort of hokey-cokey of, oh no, James O'Connor's in and he's like, oh, I thought they were taking the of getting a call up, and it's like you can't dress that up as master plan all along.
Yeah, and the connection at 10 and 15 between Tom Wright and Lolesio has been a source of a lot of the attack that goes really nicely for them. But yeah, they're gonna be busy. They're gonna have tricks up their sleeves.
We're hitting on a pet subject of mine. Is sometimes I think we give test coaches far too much credit.
No doubt,
entirely, but too much.
No doubt. I actually clipped up the switch that you might have seen between Aki and Conan for the Lions. That looks so bad. You thought is that a layer? Is there more to come from that? Because they ran it twice, both turned over, looked horrible. So you're thinking, is that a switcheroo? Is that gonna come back to try and bite the analyst that reads too much into it? But no, I was higher on the Australia performance against Fiji the second time I watched it, and they are absolutely in with a shout here. They obviously have. I think they're hopeful of having Skelton and Valentini back, which gives them so much punch. And yeah, they're gonna come very hard. Suoliti.
Well, I was going to come to him because he's the other player who certainly a lot of interest in this part of the world about him and that performance. You know, wouldn't say that they were exactly championing him in that last game. We can talk about whether it's putting down layers of trying to see others perform and that kind of thing. But you'd have to expect that he's a player that will have a vital part to play for this Wallabies setup.
Yeah, Tiny Wrinkle wasn't chasing restarts against Fiji as he did to devastating effect against England. I would be amazed.
Well, you mean
if
on
he's
his
not.
first game?
Yeah, on his first game where I was watching the warm-up and going, this guy's a weakness here. He looks a bit uncertain, and in the warm-ups and had an absolute worldie. He was phenomenal. Offloading every touch. That's another kind of theme, I guess, to get into. The Wallabies offloading under Joe Schmidt. He was renowned, wasn't he, as being super cautious as Ireland coaches and ruck, no passes out of contact. And he's clearly given the Wallabies a bit of a longer leash. Len Ikitau is, a real good proponent of that, and they'll play through teams. Some really nice stuff on the 3-man flat pods of forwards with some nice inside passes against Fiji, and clearly with those two carriers in the back row to complement McWright, who is really good on the ball himself. They're going to really challenge the Lions up the guts. They had Harry Potter, who will be familiar with us Tigers fans, who had a really, really kind of successful spell there, and I'm fairly sure that Steve Borthwick was. There's footage of Steve Borthwick saying that Harry Potter would become a Test player. I wonder whether he thought it would be for England rather than Australia, but it's come true. He was chasing the restarts against Fiji. I wonder whether Suoliti goes and I imagine they will just send him to that shallow Lions kind of receiving pod and go really hard after that time and again.
My suspicion is that we'll see more cautiousness from the Lions, but I suspect that first Test match is going to be played at 100 miles an hour.
Oh, do you remember the 2000? I still remember it because of how the pace of it. The first Test in 2013 was just blink and 20 minutes have passed, I think, and that's absolutely going to be saying. I wonder how high the quality will be, but I imagine it'll be.
Listen, that doesn't matter.
No, of course it doesn't. No, of course it doesn't.
Because there's something that there's a little bit of a narrative that's been bubbling along on this Lions series. It's like, oh, don't worry, the Australian public will get behind this when we get closer to the Test series. Now, by all accounts, actually, there was a lot more fizzing and happy in Adelaide today. We've got a week to go, and you imagine that more people will be arriving from foreign climes to come and watch this Test series and really get involved, and you'll start to hear the noise growing a little bit. But for that very reason, it's impossible for this Test series to be quiet and not interesting, even if there's sickening, gut-wrenching tension and dropped balls all over, because it all sort of adds to it, which is, frankly, looking at some of the matches at the start of this series, it needs it. But also, we're sort of, as you said, you came up to the studio today with a bit more spring in your step. You can feel it getting closer. For that reason, it almost doesn't really matter. The entertainment factor will just be like, the sort of to and fro of this Test match.
Yeah. Maybe one thing we forget, or certainly that I characterise thinking back actually to Lions Test series, is how much of the games tend to be or feel like they're played between the 10-metre lines, and there are sort of 50-50 breakdown calls, 50-50 scrum penalties that break open the whole game. Those are the really big moments, and those are the moments that kind of swing momentum in these tests, and that's I imagine that's exactly going to continue.
Okay, Charlie, the glutton for punishment that you are, for some reason you watched Scotland versus Fiji, which kicked off at 4 a.m. our time.
I mean,
you didn't watch the whole thing. Right?
I did not. I watched the last quarter and then whizzed back to have a look at the key moments. Thanks to having a very hot house and clearly a very hot 4-year-old who didn't fancy sleeping. But yeah, really impressive from Fiji, a hot start from Scotland, but Fiji stayed calm. Poor Darcy Graham was eventually sent off, but after his first yellow card for an early tackle off the back of a Fiji offload, they were sort of pouring through, and there's a little early tackle from Darcy Graham. Fiji went to the corner, scored a maul try, then went over out wide on the stroke of half time through Revovo, who Bristol fans will know very well, absolute blockbuster player for them. And then I was dreading kind of saying this guy's name because I've been a big fan for a while, but I've never really, it was one of those whose name I've never had to say out loud, but Juta Wanikolo, phenomenal. Just his balance on the ball. I've been really lucky enough to see him live twice for Toulon, most recently this season against Saracens, and he is electric. I would go as far to say one of the most electric athletes I've seen in the flesh. Just the way he beats defenders.
It's great when people carry that into the test arena.
And he scored a solo try, then backed that up by almost helping Fiji go 80 metres from the restart directly after that. He wriggled out of a tackle. He latched onto a break, went into open space and linked up with Tusova, who trucked to within a metre of the line, and Fergus Burke actually on debut got back to get a jackal turnover, but from there on debut, but truth be told, Fiji were in charge of a lot of that game from about half an hour left.
I'll tell you what, I
could have pulled away. Which you called.
Which I called. I could see Scotland stepping on a rake here, because just ringing the changes.
Like Sideshow Bob.
Yeah, like Sideshow Bob. Just ringing the changes on a tour, flitting about. And, the back line looked pretty solid, pretty dependable. But it was just one of those things where it's like, I don't know, it's just flashbacks of years gone by. I just remember in the recent past, Scotland backing up a win with a loss to the USA the very next week, and it's just something that I've seen a couple of times. So it's one of those. It's just like, I've done this dance before.
Yeah, Samoa next week, really important. And Darcy Graham, so his second yellow was from creeping offside and rushing up to intercept Kuravoli, who was at scrum half for Fiji, was dynamite again, was really good against Australia and carried that on. But yeah, poor Darcy Graham crept offside, got the intercept, so gave away a penalty try and was sent off by Ben O'Keefe, and in the process dislocated his finger really badly. So, forgettable sort of game for him. But hopefully he's fit to go against Samoa next week.
Right. So super quick mention for the fact that New Zealand
hammered France.
They absolutely hammered France.
Did their classic thing of potentially underestimating an opponent and then getting angry at their own underestimation.
And then overestimating. Yeah. It did feel like that. It was just one of those things where it's like, it was not a bad France team by any stretch of the imagination, but you feel like they shot their shot the week before. Yeah,
well, I think as a rule, your best chance on those summer tours against the All Blacks is that first game when they're settling, and France gave it a hell of a shot, but yeah, came up short this time by a distance.
Now, I whizzed through those two because I really want to talk a bit more about the fact that Wales won a game of rugby, and 18-match lose streak gone. They won their second test in Japan last week. It was very much a case of, okay, they're up against it here, they were ahead, and Japan just came back and saw it out, and it was just, you could see just, it was the physical manifestation of a lack of confidence. And it's not a surprise that after ending this horrible streak of test losses, that players and coaches alike were crying after the match from the Wales team. You could just feel like almost palpable relief. Our own James Corrigan was writing about it, and I mean, that was, the R word was the specific one used and underlined and circled, because it doesn't, at this stage, it almost doesn't matter how it happens. It's just the fact that it's happened. No. It doesn't mean that everything's magically fixed and that everything's going to be rosy now for Wales, but they've at least arrested the slide.
It should count as 2 wins, because quite palpably we say that about every test match. Obviously, you've got to win it more than once. That's a kind of classic cliche that coaches come up with, and it's true because you've got to stay on top of these momentum swings. But Wales seem to have done enough. And then conceded 2 really avoidable tries. One from
and that was when you were thinking, this is going to be a repeat of the week before.
Is this going to be another new low? But with Japan coming on strong, the tries they scored were from a charge down box kick, and then just basically an intercept of a pass in midfield, and that set the nerves going, and then for them to kind of, for Wales to come back and score a decisive try with Tame Plumtree throwing a super casual sort of cat flap to score, and Dan Edwards fitting that he got the try because he was really assured at fly half, and bless him, Dowie Lake on the bench. He'd been taken off, having absolutely emptied himself as he has done sort of throughout this run, and he's been the guy fronting a lot of the really awkward post-match interviews and saying that, you know, that this side is gonna come good and that they are really, really trying, and having to kind of dole out all of those platitudes. He was on his feet. He had his, I think it looked like a sort of towel he was holding, scrunched that up into his face, and then dropped to his seat on the bench and just stared into space, totally, like all the emotion that he had just been spent within 10 seconds of that try happening. It was actually really, really touching and really hard not to be delighted for him. I hope he's still going in Japan.
Well, you might be thinking about a call-up.
Yeah. Well, he might be, yeah.
Okay. Shall we change tack a little bit? Let's get straight into our questions, because last week we weren't able to get into them. There were some technical gremlins we were wrestling with last week. Charlie, of course, calling in from Disneyland. And Charlie, my first question comes from my son, 4 years old, who says, how was Disneyland?
Finley, fantastic. Get onto your dad and get out there. We have our eldest sons are both similar ages, and just a real quick anecdote about my 4-year-old being terrified of a ride, Thunder Mountain, but then sort of half an hour after he'd got off the ride, boasting to his cousins that he'd been on the ride and saying it was the best ride he'd been on, which was just excellent. Questionable parenting, probably from my point of view, but very proud of him.
Right, so this one comes from, let's get into the actual rugby proper. This one is from Harry, who asked this question last week. We didn't get around to it. We promised we would get to him. Are these lines too nice? Who is the enforcer? Where is the calm but violent authority?
Oh, someone like Courtney Laws is who I associate
not
with
on
quite,
this
which
tour,
who
mate.
is not on this tour, but I guess that kind of makes its own point. Quiet menace is how Laws, I remember seeing him described and thinking that was bang on. Maybe Tom Curry, you know, he's tough.
He has no regard for his own.
No regard for his safety. He talks about, there's footage of him talking in meetings about making hits, hitting and stinging people. Ellis Genge will be a big tub thumper in the changing room. We've seen that from the behind the scenes stuff. Joe McCarthy maybe in a different way, and you'd imagine would be in the 23. Someone like Bundy Aki might play that role from the back line as well. It is interesting that there isn't, that there isn't really that gnarly, unapologetically nasty streak about this Lions side. I don't think, but the sort of, I hate this term and I use it myself a lot, but this whole like standard driving stuff. There was a sort of school of thought that Owen Farrell's arrival would have helped them with that, even though
Andy Farrell is a known standard driver and Johnny Sexton is a known standard driver.
But within the playing group, and maybe that has helped a lot, notwithstanding Owen Farrell looking sort of relatively chilled and happy on the pitch. So
laughing.
Yeah, which is actually brilliant to see. So, but I mean, they are thin on them, potentially, the Lions of these enforcers. But Genge, McCarthy, Curry, those guys certainly.
I just think when you see Genge running the first angled short ball from a phase after someone trucks it up from a line out, and you go, yes, that's the modern equivalent of that.
Yeah, and that's what we'll follow. He's also got the old school, the old school sort of, him and Itoje so clearly dovetail in the sort of team talk stuff. Whereas, Maro Itoje famously doesn't swear, which is remarkable restraint, really. Ellis Genge does swear. Spoiler.
Almost certainly, yes. I'm going to answer this first one to give you a little bit of time to think, because CK1 has asked who have been the best 3 players on tour so far. And for me, actually, I think it's a disappointment for any Lions fan, or neutral really, to not see Garry Ringrose play in this first test, because I think he's been exceptional on this tour so far. I think Dan Sheehan has been fantastic. And someone was asking me in the office earlier about, if Luke Cowan-Dickey's out, how much of a blow is that for the Lions? And obviously it is a blow, and he was, I'd say, competing for a bench spot. But the reality is that Dan Sheehan is so far ahead of anyone else with that number 2 jersey that he could become, if he plays in the right way on this tour, that he could become sort of one of those guys that's associated with the Lions hooker jersey. I think Maro has captained really well after we were asking questions about that match before they left us all. And you did say 3, but I think Finn Russell's just looked to the manner born for all this, and it's not a surprise that he's toured before. But a proper tour like this, he just seems like he's been unfazed and worked nicely with everyone.
Yeah,
for you?
Yeah, Sheehan, Russell, and Toji were the 3 that sprung to mind. There are a few sneaky ones. I keep mentioning him, but
Freeman is going to get a mention from you here.
I was going to mention Earl with my other.
Right, okay.
There was actually, to bring you behind the curtain, there was a moment where I'd said Ben Earl's going well for the second time, and I was reminded by Dims that it was in fact the second time that I'd said that. I was trying to kind of push my own narrative. Scott Cummings has come on strong after, again, we're talking about those guys responding.
Actually, just to segue from you, has anyone shocked you on this tour? Like, has anyone just sort of come from left field from you where you weren't expecting to be as good as they have been?
Do you know what? Another guy I was going to say, which really might seem proper captain obvious thing to say, but when Andrew Porter has come off the bench, you've really seen how good he is in the loose. And that's not to denigrate his scrummaging, because that's been pretty dominant as well, not apart from a couple of penalties early on in the Reds game. But you've just seen how much energy you're just watching that going, absolutely no wonder Ireland want to keep him on for as much as the 80 minutes as possible. And I think that is a really big plus. Schumann was actually really good today, wasn't he? But I think it was telling that he go all 80
from him at some points today.
Yeah. Did he go all? I think he went the full 80, which is a sign to me of how much they value that Genge Porter double act.
I mean,
with good reason.
How about this for a neat segue? Because James has asked, do you think Farrell will be in the 23? Now, we've covered that already for the test. So actually I want to make this a question about the bench split. But now I agree with you. I think one of the differences between the Lions and the Wallabies will just be the sheer quality that comes off the bench. To bring on a front row, I mean, if you're bringing on, if we say Beelam's the replacement tight head, for example, and we've got Genge and Beelam, who we've mentioned before, have struck up this sort of interesting partnership, and Kelleher coming off the bench for the Lions, that's just quality coming off the bench. I mean, Porter coming off the bench in a test match is ideal, isn't it?
Yeah. When at 60 minutes after an hour on a hard deck where there's going to be fatigue, there's going to be heavy legs, certainly. The 5-3-6-2 question is so interesting because they've tried to go with it once, haven't they? And that was scuppered by someone getting injured. Cummings pulling out, potentially?
No, Byrne came in to start. Pollock pulled out.
But the way they have gone, even with a 5-3, when Chesham's been at 6, is to have those 2 flankers. That says to me that, that 5-3, they might put a lot of stock in that. I wonder whether it's a case that I do think, and I keep banging this drum, but and I'm thankful that you've sort of backed me up on it a little bit, is how important Aki is to an Andy Farrell side. However, I wonder how confident they are in Aki having to go 80 minutes.
Yes, that I'm not certain on. I don't think he's there. Or
yeah,
at least on this tour.
In which case, and it's really interesting when the Springboks are really good at being really open about this when they hold team press conferences and they talk about the makeup of their bench, and they get asked with 6-2, 5-3, and it was before they went 5-3 for the last England game at Twickenham, and they said, well, why we go 5-3 against France and England is because there's a lot of high kicking meters in the game, and I would expect that to be a feature of the test series with a lot of those kind of exchanges, in which case the back 3 are going to have a lot of meters put in their legs, or the whole sort of back division, really. So I would expect, I still think, even though a 5-3 would mean one of the back rowers missing out, I still think it's an attractive option to go with. So that means that they either go with Chesham at 6 and have 2 flankers, or they go, or they get a lock on the bench.
Well, thank you very much for your questions. We've got a whole week now till we get to that first Lions test against the Wallabies, where we'll answer a hell of a lot of them. There'll probably still be some to come. Thank you very much for sticking with us. Please pay attention to all of our output at Telegraph Sport. Charlie will obviously be offering his fantastic analysis throughout this test series. We also have Gavin Mairs, and thank you very much, Gav, for dropping by again from Australia. Gavin Mairs and Dan Schofield will be out there pumping out their usual fantastic output. Make sure you pay attention to that. Ollie Brown will be heading out for the test series, and we will be nattering away here. And you know what? It's going to be a hell of a lot of fun. Thanks very much for stopping by. Test series to come.
Go.compare, proud supporters of the Welsh Rugby Union, is the go-to comparison service for savvy savers. We're delighted to power the Telegraph Rugby Podcast this summer and help listeners make good calls on their insurance, energy and more. When things get tough, Go.compare has got your back. Get quotes from dozens of insurance providers and compare cover to make sure you're getting the right deal for you. Start your search for satisfying insurance at Go.compare.